Hello, good afternoon, everyone. This is afternoon in India right now. I'm sorry, I think something has happened with my webcam, so I cannot. I don't know if you're able to see me or not. Okay, so I'm sorry for this problem. So I'll start with my paper, and I've divided this paper into 4 parts. So I'll be discussing what is the importance of love actually in the political philosophy, the domain that I work in, and why we need to take the question of love um, as seriously or as important. In the other part, I'll be talking about love in the times of the dating sites because it's something which is related to the case study that I'm taking. And then through which I'll move to the love in the times of AI, how it's different and what kind of challenges it poses. And then after that, I'll come to the 2 case studies that I'm taking, Meghdootam by Kalidas, which is a text, ancient Indian text, very famous for its descriptions of nature and the love, and then the striking vipers, which is an episode from Black Mirror. So I'm starting with my first section, that is love and the political. So the question of love has been important not only philosophically but also politically. Love becomes the axis of all changes, which not only change the political realm but also the social imagination. When it changes the social imagination, it also changes the way we try to do politics. There are thousands of examples of this kind because the question of love becomes the question of being. As Hart and Negri discuss in their book Commonwealth, love is the process of production of common and the production of subjectivity. Love is an ontological event in that it marks a rupture with which exists and with which we exist in the creation of a new being is constituted by love. All the revolutions indulge into conversation around the idea of desire, what desires are to be produced or diminished, what to hide or what to sustain. Each restructuring of society is the restructuring of the question of desire, of love, and of possession. The Soviet Union went through the same reframing of questions. Bolshevik revolutionaries were in the heated debate on the concept of love. Primarily, the debate was between Kollontai and Lenin. Kollontai supported a theory called glass water theory. Glass water theory represents the idea of free love. Glass water theory stresses that the idea of private property does not only exist in the economic sphere, it has also captured the very idea of human life and love, and we cannot imagine anything outside the private property. For Kollontai, loving and having the free sexual relations is very much connected to the freedom and liberty. But for Lenin, he seems to take love more like honey, where he had a little bit conservative approach to the concept of Kollontai. But the question in the so this was the first part, love and the political. Now in the second part, love in the times of the dating sites, I'll start with the question of to love and not to love. So in the times of the dating site, the question shifts from itself from love to love or not to love. In the times of dating site, as Badiou puts it in his book, In the Praise of Love, he tries to analyze the concept of dating sites, which tries to eliminate the idea of chance and encounter from the idea of love. He finds it utterly nonsensical, and he put forward his theory of uh, so he tries to analyze the concept of dating site, which tries to eliminate the idea of chance and encounter from the idea of love. He finds it utterly nonsensical and puts forward his theory of love, where chance is the first stage of love. This is something that we find in the works of Stresso Horvitz as well. He also criticizes the emerging dating sites for the same reason and thinks that chance is an important element or the part of the process of love. Badi calls his theory as two scenes theory. According to him, love is a truth process, and truth is the construction of a new path and a new truth. It is a constant process. Badri gives 2 important theoretical tools, encounter and event. Through these tools, he explains what is love. Badiou says that when 2 people meet each other, it is an encounter which happens because of chance. This encounter becomes an event, which means it has so many possibilities in it which are not realized. Once this chance happen, then there is a need to eliminate this chance. And according to Badiou, this is done through fidelity. It is done through commitment. And when somebody says to someone that I love you and I will love you forever, it means that love is no more a chance, it is a promise in time. it is a promise to eternity. According to Vadu, it does not mean that one will not sleep with the other person or the shallow definitions of the fidelity, but it is a promise to sustain this relation and reinvent it from time to time. Badu thinks that the feeling of love is a feeling the feeling of difference. It is the process of constructing a new world. One sees the world through oneself only. Love makes one to see the world through two different people, hence creating a new world. This creation is also a continuous process, and this is the reason that he called his theory as two scenes theory. Eliot's work also traces the romantic love in the 20th century. She says that this love has to be understood with relation to consumerism and the shape of capitalism. In her book, Consuming the Romantic Utopia, Love and the Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism, she discusses how romance has replaced the religion as a centrality of the day-to-day life. Now, love is a value in itself. It is seen as an essential element in the pursuit of happiness, and with the development of the idea of marital love, love's definition became more individualistic and private. Love became the love of two people, completely engrossed in other, with the very less connection with the world. The capitalist logic becomes the logic of love, and that is, you are mine and I am yours. The question of romantic love turns out to be more complicated in the later modernity. And how does one understand the social relationship at this age? So now in the third section, Love in the Time of AI, I'll just through the works of Eva Illuge, I just try to discuss the question of love. It is a time of technology and the question of romantic love turns out to be more complicated in the later modernity. And how does one understand the social relationships exist in our life in so many senses? The shape of love also changed with the advancement of technology. This is a time of dating sites and online relationships. Technology is a medium through which relationships flourish, but it also poses some very serious questions. How do we differentiate between the relationships that exist in real world and the one that exists in the virtual world? Eva Illouz tried to understand this in variety of her works. According to her, there is a difference between the self that exists on the online platform and the self that exists in the real world. As she describes in her book, Cold Intimacies, the making of emotional capitalism, she says, what makes the net romance so incontestably superior to real life relationship is the fact that the net romance annuls the body, thus presumably enabling a fuller expression of one's authentic self. Because the body is no more at the center of the relationship, this is a kind of relationship that helps emotions to evolve from the more authentic self, which is the disembodied true self. This poses a very important challenge to the notions of romantic love that existed earlier, because romantic love is very much revolving around the idea of body, rosy lips, beautiful eyes, body smell, and the sweaty palms. The idea of love, romance, and emotions are deeply embedded in the idea of the body. The virtual meetings in itself a very interesting question, as one has to create an online personality for oneself called profile. And these sites are very much grounded in the assumptions of psychiatry, where they try to understand the human self through the assumptions of the same. And the questionnaire for such dating sites is produced by sometimes by a psychologist or by basic assumptions of psychological self. These sites also base themselves on the idea of emotional compatibility. This process of creating one's profile requires a lot of introspection, reflection, and labeling. These sites require one to read oneself objectively, define one's fantasies or ideal in the same way. According to values, this entire activity is based on the psychological persuasion in the three senses. First, the self is created by dividing oneself into the different categories of taste, personality, opinion, etc. Second, posting the profile converts a private self into a public performance. Eva Illouz explained it in this way: the internet makes the private self visible and publicly displaced to an abstract and anonymous audience, which, however, is not public, but rather an exaggeration of private self. On the internet, the private psychological self becomes a public performance. The third is the objectification of the self through visual means of representations in language. When meeting requires one's perception of oneself, framing of oneself, and the ideal of one ideal of another's self, and the traditional method is reversed. In the traditional method, knowledge precedes the attraction, yet attraction precedes knowledge. But another basic assumption is the assumption of choice, because the ideal of such dating sites is that the best romantic encounter will be the result of the best choice made out of so many. The dating sites situate themselves in the ideas of liberal tradition. They completely ignore the idea of chance. But the basis of most dating sites is reducing the chance and heartbreak. Both feeling are integral to love. In a way, the internet is the market that places every person in competition with another person. In this context, I'm reading two different love stories from two different times. One is an ancient Indian text written by Kalidas called Meghadutam, and the other story is of from the Black Mirror, striking vipers. So Kalidas, while writing Meghadutam, talks about the story of Yaksh and Yakshani. Yaksh and Yakshani is basically two natural forces. And these, so Yaksh, he was completely immersed in the love of the Yakshani. And because of that, he ignored the duties that he has to complete it for the king. And that's why he was given the punishment to go and live on a mountain for a very long time. Now the Yaksh living on the mountain in exile, remembering Yakshani every day, misses everything about her. So he sees a cloud going above from his head, and he asks this cloud to give Yakshani his message of love. This cloud moves from this one particular peak of Himalaya and crosses the entire continent and goes to the Yakshani. And in this process, Yaksh actually describes to this cloud the path to reach the Dakshini. While describing this path, he also talks about the geographical locations through which this cloud will has to go. And in these geographical locations, he also describes how his Yakshini is similar to all the natural phenomena or the natural activities that this cloud will encounter in his way. This entire process of description is actually the description of the beauty of Yakshini, how her lips are as beautiful as the rose petals, how her eyes are as deep as the rivers, and her body and her skin is as soft as the flowers. And if he and but at the time when Yaksh is actually imagining the Yakshini, he's actually imagining her in a in his complete in her complete form. In his mind, he's completely lost in the idea of Yakshini. So if we see in this love story, we see a sense of separation which comes from the space. So Yaksh and Yakshini love each other and completely immersed in each other's thought, but they cannot be with each other because there's a long distance that they cannot fathom very easily. When we come to the times of AI, this space is no more a problem, but the time is. One person can be at the very different spaces at one particular time, and one can be one different selves at one particular time. With the touch of one screen, one reaches to the another self, to the another space, and to the another time. So in the striking vipers, the kind of question of fidelity and love are posed. It's very important for our times. So to have a relationship with a friend physically in a video game where both of them enjoy the sexual relation with each other, and when they tried it in the real life, they realized that it's not possible for them to even kiss each other. The physical intimacy, which can be developed only through the profiles that they have on that gaming platform, and those personalities which were involved in that intimacy are definitely different from the personalities that they live and realize in the real world. And thus we come to this understanding that there is a boundary of self and then there is a boundary of life that in a way differentiate the real and virtual, not into two distinct apartments, but two different ways of being that are decided by the mediums through which one exists in those different realities. The virtual realities annuls the body, so the attraction is done or produced through words or the different kind of phrases or the different ways in which one presents oneself through a profile. In the real life, it's the body, it's movement, it's smell, the color of the hairs, the color of the eye that attracts the other person. So I completely understand that these two stories come from two completely different backgrounds and contexts. But to differentiate them and to talk about how the question of love has changed in AI, not through the question of, not because uh, change in AI, because there is a change in the hurdles that is posed on love in our times, is to actually understand that there the love that we face or the kind of problems that we face in our love stories or in dystopic literature are completely different from the literatures that we have encountered before, because the self that we are encountering, or the self that we are creating with a lot of creativities through on these different online platforms, is something that we have faced first time in the human history. Thank you.